Greetings everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. You know the drill. We're ranking all the Pillars of Eternity classes. If you need a refresher on basic mechanics, there's a link in the description to my 2023 Pillars of Eternity Beginner's Guide. Let's jump into the second class of this series, Chanter. These warriors are capable of singing songs that buff your team, debuff enemies, and even summon allies onto the field. The core mechanic of the class is phrases, chants, and invocations. Phrases are sung constantly during the battle and passively trigger effects for your allies or enemies. Chants are collections of phrases that you can switch between during combat. Invocations are basically chanter spells that can only be used after a certain amount of phrases have already been sung, and typically their magical effects are more powerful than what phrases are capable of. Chanters get a +2 bonus to lore and a +1 bonus in mechanics. As I mentioned in the beginner's guide, a high rank in lore is one of the best ways to get additional dialogue options, so it's strongly recommended that your main character takes this skill. High ranks in mechanics is absolutely a necessity, but this can be covered by you or a party member. The class gets very low endurance, low health, average accuracy, and high deflection. Your phrases are not impacted by armor or action speed, so there's flexibility in how you play this class. More on that later. Starting at level 1, you could choose 2 level 1 phrases. Before we break down what they do, let's look at 2 lines every phrase has. The first is duration, which obviously tells you how long the song will last. The second is linger, which tells you how long this phrase's effect will linger after you have finished singing. So essentially, even though you sing the song for 4 seconds, the effect will last for 6 seconds. This is important to note because you can switch between different phrases, and based upon how long the duration or linger effect is, you can have multiple effects working on your team or enemies at the same time. A high intellect score will increase how long the effects linger, but not the overall duration you have to sing the song. Alright, now let's start breaking down what these phrases do. Blessed was Wingrid, quickest of his tribe, will provide your entire team a +1.2 bonus to speed and a +10 bonus to your reflex defense. If your team has other mechanics that increase move speed, then stacking with this could be worthwhile, otherwise I would skip it. Dull the edge, blunt the point, reduces your enemy's slash and pierce damage by 10%. That might seem like a small amount, but keep in mind that most of the time slash and pierce damage should be impacted by a tank's damage reduction. Consequently, the amount of damage this phrase reduces is oftentimes closer to 15 or even 20%. Pretty much a no-brainer if your chanter is on the front line. Thick grew their tongue, stumbling over words, will reduce your enemy's concentration score by 10. This can be very useful if you have a team that revolves around constantly interrupting opponents. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth it. Come, soft winds of death steadily drains health from your enemies. On paper, it probably doesn't look like much, but in practice, it's one of your best damage dealing abilities throughout the game, especially if you have teammates that use debuffs to reduce enemies' reflex defense. Doing that will allow this and other area of effect phrases to critically hit more often. I strongly recommend picking this up. At the sight of their comrades, their hearts grew bold, adds +10 to your fortitude and will defenses. That's not bad, so you can grab this if you're not keen on the other options. Now you can choose one level 1 invocation. In the invocation description, there will always be a line telling you how many phrases must be uttered before this invocation can be used. So in this case, you must have sung 3 phrases before you can summon this ghost. We'll circle back to this system later. But Rennie Darrett's ghost, He Would Not Rest, will summon 1 phantom. This is probably the best option on the list, because the phantom can stun enemies and it attacks fast enough to permanently stun lock opponents. In addition, it can sneak attack, so if summoned in a flanking position or some other advantageous situation, the phantom can potentially do some really nice damage. It is very squishy though, so don't expect it to last long. And Hel Harif, crashed upon the shield, reduces the damage reduction by 5 for all enemies within a 5-meter 90-degree cone. This can be useful in the early game, but I would say skip it. If their bones slept under that hill, none could say allows you to summon 3 skeletons. The skeletons last for 20 seconds, as opposed to the Phantom, which only lasts for 12 seconds. Basically, if you need more offense, go with the Phantom, but if your problem is defense, then flooding the field with 3 allies for a longer duration is the more effective strategy, and this is worth picking up. Not felled by the axe nor by the storm causes all allies in a 2.5 meter 90-degree cone to gain plus 5 damage reduction against slash attacks and plus 10 damage reduction against shock attacks for 20 seconds. This is okay, but there are plenty of battles where enemies don't use slash or shock damage, so it's inferior compared to other options. The thunder rolled like waves on the Black Seas causes all enemies in a 2.5 meter 90-degree cone to take crushing damage while also being stunned and pushing them 4 meters. The damage is decent, and obviously enemies being stunned is very useful, but the pushback is not helpful if you are running a melee heavy party. Whether or not you like this depends on the type of party you are running. Thrice She Was Wrong and Thrice Justly Avenged does solid shock damage to all enemies in a 3 meter 90-degree cone. If enemies are tightly packed and vulnerable to shock damage, this is nice, but the summons are useful in a wider variety of situations. White Worms Writhed in the Bellies of the Dead does massive crushing damage in a 10 meter 90-foot cone, along with splash damage for an additional 2 meter radius. The problem is that not only do you need to sing 3 phrases, but there also must be a nearby dead body for you to trigger this invocation. That means it's not as widely applicable as other options, but I would still say pick this up because when it's available, it's glorious. Now that we have walked through some of the phrases and invocations, let's go over how you assign them to your chanter. So here you'll see that I have Rennie Darrett's Ghost as a level 1 invocation, but 3 phrases must be chanted before it's unlocked. When you click the Edit Chants button, a screen opens up that allows you to assign your phrases. If I click Soft Winds of Death, it will add that phrase into the chant. Notice that the first bar is fully colored in, and then there's a lightly colored portion. The green fully colored in part designates the duration of the phrase, or more specifically, how long Kana must sing the phrase. Once this duration is complete, you are counted as having sung 1 phrase. I want to note one more time, the duration is not impacted by your action speed or dexterity rank at all. At level 4, you will get Brisk Recitation, which reduces the duration of all your phrases by up to 50%. Outside of that passive ability, a phrase's duration is set in stone. Let's circle back to the chant screen. Looking at the Soft Winds bar, the lighter portion designates how long the phrase will linger on the battlefield after Kana has finished singing the phrase. I could just leave this here and Kana would chant the phrase over and over again. If I click another phrase, such as Sight of Their Comrades, you'll see that the phrase has been added where the linger portion begins, but after the full duration. So now when combat starts, Kana will sing Soft Winds first, and once the duration is finished, he will start singing At the Sight of Their Comrades. This means there will be a duration of time when the effects of both phrases are active, buffing your allies and damaging enemies. Once again, the higher your intelligence rank, the longer your phrases will linger and the more you can overlap different phrases. I can add another Soft Winds into the chant so that once Comrades is finished, that phrase will pick right back up. You can add as many different phrases as you like into the chant. Since these are very low-level phrases, their durations are short, and you will quickly burn through enough of them to use invocations. Phrases with more powerful effects will also have longer durations, such as Dragon Wail, which can do a ton of damage but also takes 8 seconds to sing, as opposed to Soft Winds, which only takes 4. This means it will take a significantly longer amount of time to unlock invocations. This give and take is where the complexity comes in regarding how to use the class. Higher level phrases force you to use less invocations, but lower level phrases have much less powerful passive effects. Because Kana's intelligence is high, Dragon Wailed has a long enough linger duration that I can add a low level phrase and it will still not interrupt Dragon Wailed's effects. So in this example, Kana will start the fight singing Dragon Wail for 8 seconds and then go into Soft Winds for 4 seconds before then switching back to Dragon Wailed. Because the linger duration is so long, when soft wind starts up, dragon wailed is still running, meaning both of these phrases will damage enemies during this runtime. And then once it's finished, the second dragon wailed is already started and will continue running. Keep in mind that some phrases, such as dragon wailed, stack with themselves. So in this situation, I would actually do more damage to enemies if I took out soft winds and just sang dragon wailed over and over again. The order of your phrases cannot be customized in combat. However, you can switch between A, B, C, or D, and each of them can have a different list of phrases based upon your needs when fighting. Hopefully all of this is clear, but if it's not, please ask questions in the comments and I will be happy to help. Circling back to the talents this class provides, at level 2 you can pick up Ancient Memory, which is a passive ability that continuously heals allies for a small amount of endurance while they are within 4 meters of you. If you are running a Chanter with high might and intelligence, this is a no-brainer. Otherwise, the healing is less noticeable, but it's still worth picking up. Keep in mind that most Chanters don't get their power from talents, and therefore they need less talents, so spending them in this way doesn't hurt you. At level 4, if you've already selected Ancient Memory, you can also get Beloved Spirits, which will change the effect to heal even more endurance. If you are using Ancient Memory, then this is definitely a strong pickup as well. At level 5, you can choose one level 2 phrase. Lo, their endless host, the harbingers of doom, makes all enemies around you frightened. This debuff lowers resolve and dexterity by 2 and reduces accuracy by 10. Definitely a strong option to consider if your Chanter is supposed to be a crowd control character. 1 dozen stood against the power of the Saint creates an aura that increases your team's defense against frightened and terrified attacks. There are better ways to deal with these effects, and I would skip this phrase. Rime and Frost follow the footfalls of Karth, causes your allies' footsteps to create traps that hobble enemies and do freeze damage against them. This is fantastic if your team isn't good at holding aggro and consequently enemies get past your front line easily. It's also great if you purposely run around the battlefield to fill it up with footstep traps. There are many people who swear by this ability, but honestly I'm not a fan and find the playstyle counterintuitive, so I recommend you skip this. Sure-handed Illa knocked her arrows with speed, creates an aura that gives your team an additional 20% reload and ranged attack speed. This is bananas if you have multiple party members who reload or attack with weapons at range. Otherwise, it's not nearly as effective and should be skipped. The Fox and the Farmer did Run and Leap, causes all enemies to experience a -10 penalty to their accuracy against disengaging opponents. This is a mediocre debuff and should be skipped. At level 6, you can choose one level 2 Invocation. At the sound of his voice, the killer's froze stiff, causes all enemies within a 5-meter 90-degree cone to become paralyzed. Paralyzed enemies have their dexterity reduced to 0, along with their reflex and deflection defenses being reduced by 40 points. They also cannot take any actions. This is a monster ability that is useful the entire game. Definitely pick this up. Gensrick slew the beast, but soon faced his kin, summons 3 worms. Skip this, you have better options. My son, do you see our sisters across the moor? Summons 2 will-o-wisps. Will-o-wisps can confuse enemies, which is obviously useful, but again, I would skip this. Rennie Darrett's ghost Spack, I'll catch you Ben Fidel, causes all enemies within a 4-meter 90-degree cone to become terrified. Terrified enemies have their resolve and dexterity reduced by 4, while their accuracy is reduced by 20. This is nice, but again, there are better crowd control options, so skip this. Shatter their shackles, cast off their chains, will increase your entire team's defense against hobbled, stuck, paralyzed, and petrified effects. There are some fights where this is very useful, but not enough to take it as an invocation. Skip this. The lover cried out to the beloved, I am yours, will charm all enemies within a 2.5-meter 90-degree cone. Charmed enemies fight on your side and have all defenses reduced by 25. In some situations, this is an even better crowd control option than Killer's Frozen Stiff, and I highly recommend you pick it up. Rejoice, my comrades. 2 Fingers of Daylight creates beams of light that restore endurance and make allies immune to frightened and terrified effects. This is mediocre compared to other options, so I would skip it. At level 9, you get access to level 3 phrases. Afalaf Usmith Fear increases all allies' weapon burn damage by 25%. If you have several martial characters, this could definitely be worth picking up. 7 men onto the deck they went increases your entire team's defense against prone attacks and shock or freeze damage. It will also increase their concentration. There are better options, so skip this. The Dragon Thrash, the Dragon Wailed, is arguably the Chanter's best phrase for damage. It will deal burn and slash damage to all enemies over a period of time. You can get this high enough that it damages all the enemies in the room for over 100 points every 4 seconds. There's a case to be made that repeatedly chanting this is really all a damage-focused chanter needs to do. Definitely pick it up. Please note that it does damage over time, so the Scion of Flame talent, which increases your burn damage, has no effect on it. The Silver Knight Shield, broke both arrow and blade, will increase the deflection of all your allies by 10. Unless you are running a party of frontliners who have a decent enough deflection stat that a little more actually helps them, you can skip this. At level 10, you unlock level 3 Invocations. Gurdness Beast, lit the night with his breath, will summon 1 Drake. There are better options, go ahead and skip this. Oh, but knock not on the door of Erdel and Gurdel will summon 2 ogres. Absolutely you want to pick this up, as the creatures can both tank and do considerable damage to your opponents. Rise Again, Scions of Adon will revive all allies within a 3.5 meter 90-degree cone. This is arguably a more economical way to revive than burning a pre-spell slot, so pick it up. 7 nights she waited while the white winds wept, send 7 bolts of freezing ice all around you at enemies. Obviously this invocation works best when you are completely surrounded by lots of enemies, but it's definitely worth a pickup. The Bride caught their ruse and set to make them pay will give your entire party bonuses to dexterity, intelligence, and perception. Nice, but these kinds of buffs are best left to your priest, so I would skip this. The Bridemen slew 34, they crossed half the hall, provides a similar bonus for might, constitution, and resolve. Once again, skip this. At level 13, you will unlock level 4 phrases, which all have a duration of 10 seconds. Therefore, even though some of these effects are nice, it's a real sacrifice to use them. They shielded their eyes against the vampir's gaze, creates an aura that increases your team's defense against confused, dominated, and charmed attacks by 20 points. This is absolutely a lifesaver against vampires who are extremely irritating enemies to face, but its usefulness plummets hard against most other creatures. I would skip this. Her Courage Thick as Steel gives your entire party a 30-point damage shield. By this point in the game, many of your characters will hover around 900 health points. A 30-point damage shield does next to nothing for you. Old Sick would not rest till his hunger was sated, restores 15% of the damage you deal as endurance. If you are consistently doing massive damage numbers, then maybe this is worth it, but if your party is built properly, then damage is probably spread out amongst the team, so I would skip this. Quick note before we review the last 3 levels. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate you hitting the like button. This information lets me know which videos the community is enjoying. If you want to support this kind of content, please consider becoming a member of the channel, where you will get access to full playthrough episodes. At level 14, you will unlock level 4 Invocations, which require 6 phrases in order to be cast. That's a long time to wait in a fight, especially if you are using higher level phrases. Therefore, while you may select some of these, depending on your playstyle, you probably won't be able to use them very much. So Sink Thy Biting Winds, O El Nari is a blast of cold air that does freezing damage while impairing movement, and then the effect jumps to up to 4 enemies. This ability will also ignore some damage reduction. Unfortunately, it does less damage than 7 Nights She Waited and costs 1 more phrase to cast, so I would skip this. What Ral Naka found down the deep will summon a Swamp Spore. This summon can really take a punch, and it will try to dominate your enemies, which is a very powerful debuff. I would pick this up. Last on the list is their champion Brave the Horde Alone, which will increase your attack speed by 40%, your damage reduction by 10, and your interrupt by 50 for a long length of time. Personally, I don't care for this because a Chanter's strength comes from their phrases and invocations, not what they can do in combat, so increasing their ability to deal out damage with weapons usually doesn't help you. If you are using a build where the Chanter getting more weapon attacks really helps the team, then by all means pick this up. At level 15, you get access to level 5 phrases. Mercy and kindness follow wherever she walked, increases the healing your team receives by 100%. This obviously fits ancient memory like a glove and makes your Chanter a significantly more effective passive healer. If that interests you, pick it up. If it doesn't, then skip it. With all your strength, Slay the Beast gives you additional accuracy and damage against beasts. There are a lot of beasts in the game, but honestly, there's a lot of all the enemy types, so most likely this isn't worth it. At level 16, you unlock access to level 5 Invocations. Calling to his bidding, the ancient instruments of death will summon 3 weapons that attack your foes. Personally, I don't think it's worth stacking up 7 phrases just to throw out a summon, but your mileage may vary. Boil their flesh from skin to bone will do raw damage to all enemies within a 3-meter 90-degree cone. In addition, everyone in the AoE will take corrode damage and become sickened for at least 10 seconds. This option is dangerous since the secondary portion of the effect can damage your party members, but I still think it's the better choice. Overall, I rank this class in A. On the one hand, Chanters are incredibly powerful. A tank Chanter constantly singing Dragon Wailed and emitting ancient memory is unquestionably one of the most effective builds in the game. Chanter also doesn't clash with how you can potentially roleplay the Watcher. Your Chanter party member is Kana, who I personally do not care for, so I think leaving him on the bench and rolling this class yourself is an easy choice. Unfortunately, a few issues hold this class back. The Chanter's phrases are used automatically, and there's a case to be made that the best Chanters don't use invocations at all, which is the manual portion of the class. Consequently, even though the playstyle is very effective, it can also be very boring. The things you'll do manually as a Chanter, such as weapon attacks, will, for the most part, be mediocre. Even if you decide to build this class in a different way and use more invocations, the other issue is the game doesn't provide nearly enough information about how Chanter actually works. I cannot tell you how many people have commented on my channel that they completely avoid the class because they're confused about the mechanics. It's probably difficult to tell because I've done an excellent job of laying out all of this information, but coming into this game fresh and trying to unravel what Chanters actually do is unnecessarily painful. Last but not least, for most players, Chanter will not feel like a class that is steadily getting more powerful abilities. It is very possible that by level 9, if not earlier, you already have all the phrases and invocations you are actually going to use for the entire game. The ramp up in power just happens naturally, not due to real strategy or decision making on your part. This reinforces that even though the playstyle is very effective, it can also be very boring. That completes my ranking of the Chanter class. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.